Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters. And yes, coming back with another fancy schmancy horror list. Yes, we just did one recently, going over kind of just a discussion about the most I guess best films of 2024 so far, best horror films, and we decided we wanted to kind of keep doing these because we had some fun ideas, and this was one that I came up with and I pitched to Luke. I said, I've always wanted to sit down and just say, like, here's a list or here's like, a showing of some of my favorite summer themed horror films. And these would be films that aren't just like all time classics. We have a few of those mixed in here, but the approach we tried to hit with this is kind of hit every facet and every avenue. So you're going to have a pretty good mix in this, I would say. Wouldn't you agree, Luke?
Yeah, I think it's going to give you a pretty good variety. We didn't want to kind of just seclude ourselves to one section, like all-time classics of, where everyone's heard of and it's on everyone's list, and we're kind of just retreading what everyone's seen. So we tried to, like Dylan said, we have some of those really recognizable things, but then we have some kind of off the beaten path, maybe some things that I think horror fans are aware of, but not everything that's going to be appearing on everyone else's list for summer, must-see summer films.
Absolutely. And, calling this list top 10 must see summer films or top 10 horror essentials, we got to go into it's a lot like camping. You know what I mean? You got to go in with the bare essentials. So look at this list as just if you're going to sit down and you want something to kind of reference throughout the summertime over the next 3 months of like what would be something, maybe something I've never seen or something that you want to revisit that's summer themed in horror. That's what this list is. So let's start off. We got 10 picks here, 5 and 5. We're just going to alternate. And again, this is no particular order. We're not saying any of these are better than the other. All we're saying is that you should check these out. And mine, coming in at number 10, my first pick is Madman, which is a little known slasher film. Now, I will admit, this is not highbrow by any stretch of the imagination. But man, I found this movie. I think it was recommended to me by a friend I was working with back at the used media store, and I got it on Blu-ray and I watched it, and it is essentially just Hatchet and Friday the 13th. But damn, is this movie fun?
Yeah, absolutely. This one, it actually came out in what, 1981, I think, or
81,
something.
yep.
So, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
This is early on, so you can't even justifiably say that it's a Friday 13th ripoff because it was kind of, finding its own rhythm at that time. And, like you said, this isn't a film that has a ton of gravitas to it or anything like that. It's just a lot of fun. It's got unlimited rewatchability. There's some great kills in here, and just, a fun slasher design, I guess. It's really intriguing, especially to look back at the time in 1981 and realize, okay, this is something that is, trying to come up with something original that followed suit with a lot of slashers that went throughout the 80s.
Absolutely. And you got our main killer. His name is Madman Mars. Again, just kind of a very butch, heavy set, burly guy running around with an axe, chopping up teens left, right, and center. It's a classic camp slasher, and one I don't hear a lot of people talking about. So that's why it made my list here. It's one that I always love recommending to people, especially because it opens up in front of a campfire. It sets those tones and those feelings right away. You get that right off the bat. But Luke, what is your pick coming in, I guess, at number 9?
Well, as we talked about, there would be some familiar titles here in our discussion. I got to say, this is probably a familiar one, especially a familiar idea of when summer hits as a kid. What do? You go to camp, but you're not going to Camp Blood or Camp Crystal Lake. No, we're going to Sleepaway Camp. This is a must-see, I think. One of those ones that does appear on a lot of people's lists, but it's just because it's that good. And this was something in the early 80s, and I will say maybe ahead of its time for the subject matter that we do get unveiling of sorts. We won't spoil it on here in case you haven't seen this one, but you have Angela, which is just such a great character, and a lot of off-putting characters. There's a chef character in here that is just a little wild, so they really do touch on some wild subject matter, I think, in this film, but it kind of gives you that summer vibe. You're at the camp, it's almost like a Friday the 13th, but with a younger cast.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, this is one that I saw years ago, and I just remember being so like uncomfortable through many scenes in this film. Like it is one of the few camp slashers that actually will really make you kind of wince, in not just because of the violence or anything, but again, you mentioned that Cook character, and even though I was in high school, so it's like, clearly I get what the subject matter there is going on. But then yeah, that I mean the ending is ahead of its time, but just the psychological aspect that they put into that, and what it is, again, we're not going to spoil it for the few of you who probably don't know what happens. It is definitely something that I feel like more people are picking up nowadays and seeing it as for what it is, and I think that's super important. I know last year this movie caught a little bit of heat on social media, got caught up in a little bit of a stir, and I had chimed in there with a little comment, basically just talking about how this film is very much ahead of its time. It is saying something important. There are a lot deeper meaning, like more deeper meanings than just what they're saying, like what they're showing. The fact that people are just kind of looking at it from like just the I guess the surface level perspective, is super unfortunate. And yeah, it seems like this is one that I think is just getting more and more popular every year.
Yeah, it's something that is such a unique story of its own, melded into that slasher genre. This is something that I think when we're talking remakes or reboots, anything like that, I think Sleepaway Camp might get its just due at some point just because of that subject matter. I think, it's more prevalent nowadays than it was back in 1983. So, I think that could be an interesting, if we see that pop up. But, I can see this one go flying under the radar for some new horror fans that maybe have not uncovered this one or some of those early 80s films.
Absolutely. And, going into our next pick here, though, another tradition that at least that I grew up with, my wife certainly grows up with, and we tend to do this every year because in her town, they have like a kind of a carnival or like a little bit of a weekend thing called Rock the Docks. So, yeah, obviously that includes little pop up amusement parks. You go get your cotton candy. Your popcorn, your what do they have? Those things, the pancake batter, the
Like
funnel
funnel
cakes.
cakes?
Yeah, funnel cakes. And I am talking about Funhouse again from 1981. You can see I have an affinity for that year when it comes to my horror. But yeah, no, this is a Toby Hooper underrated gem in my opinion. Nobody talks about this film when it comes to Toby Hooper's filmography. I feel like you have to like talk to like people who are in the horror space like us and some of our friends who like really like dove deep into this stuff, but I absolutely love this movie. Again, kind of a slasher, but a little bit of a monster movie too, if you want to look at it like that. There's a little tiny bit of a slasher creature feature combination here, and I think it's super original. It's super fun, as in the title, Fun House. But yeah, it also just gives you those small town vibes that we're always talking about with our horror films, and especially our '80s horror films that we love.
Yeah, you said in your opinion, you feel like this is, one of those gems. And I will say that I think that should be everyone's opinion. I will not tolerate any slander on Funhouse on the channel here. This is one of my all time favorites here. I uncovered this one, I think it was on AMC, just one afternoon, just playing. And I remember that opening with the brother, one of our main
Yes.
characters, and in just that opening there, that really caught my intrigue, and I had no idea what I was in store for. And I say, this one, how you said it's kind of like a slasher creature feature. I love that creature element to it because it was something I was not expecting. And I think if you haven't seen this one, you wait for that unveiling, and it's just something that is so off-putting and really. This one, as it's told more so through the lens of a child, I've always kind of put this on par with something like more demented Monster Squad, just
Yes.
because of the subject matter. And I absolutely love, like, when I'm writing this DNA from Funhouse is always in anything that I write because it really does capture that small town feel, and just kind of that time period in itself. Just they have like a sideshow, and it's very off-putting with the elements they do touch on. But this one, just like Madman, I think this one has unlimited rewatchability. It's something that I watch regularly a couple times a year just because it never isn't fun to watch. It's always a good time.
Absolutely, yeah, and I mean, I love the idea of what they're doing with this funhouse, because it could have easily just been, they throw somebody in there and they're getting chased by a slasher killer, but having the DNA and the backstory of this monstrous character, this almost Frankenstein's monster. That's a little nudge if you've seen the film. Kind of tied to this carnival and getting his backstory and stuff. I mean, Toby Hooper was one of the greatest of all time when it comes to horror, and this is just another one that I feel like if you haven't seen it, then you are totally missing out on, again, a Toby Hooper horror gem. But why don't we move into our next pick there, Luke?
Yeah, when thinking of, the summertime feels and everything, you always go out to the cabin. And I thought Cabin Fever would be very appropriate pick for the summertime. Just because when we talk about off-putting, we talk about shaving your legs, and I think that's all I have to say when we're talking about Cabin Fever.
Oh, yeah.
That scene still gets me. I just love the element that they put in there of this kind of everyone's decomposing just from drinking the water, and I thought that is so, knowing that concept, and as soon as or one of our characters takes a drink of water and you know that they're infected, it's something where you're already at the edge of your seat, and as soon as they take that drink, you're just waiting to see the mayhem that's going to ensue, and they don't disappoint here. Plus we get a lovely cameo from Eli Roth in this one, so I think it's got a fun cast, a relatable cast, and just that element of gore that they put in here. There's the one scene of the one girl that's just completely decomposed, and I think, is she out in the like the shed or something like that?
Yes, she's out in the shed by like you're talking about towards the end of the film when they have to.
Yes. And
Yeah.
that, for me, that is a scene that sticks with me, as in, like, the shaving your legs for me is like gross out, but that one is purely twisted for me.
Yeah, I mean, for me, one of the more unsettling scenes, like, in all honesty, is when they there's this homeless guy. Now, mind you, it's been a little bit since I've seen this, but there's a homeless guy that they kind of run into early on in the movie, and he ends up dying and falling into the water supply that they're going into, and just the sight when they come across his body and thinking that they've been ingesting that has always just messed with my stomach anytime I sit down and watch this movie. It's one of the few horror films I can say, and again, it's been a while, but the reason is because the last time I sat down and watched it, I felt a little queasy at times. Like, I just don't like the idea of all the gory, sticky bacteria that would be going into them. And yeah, I mean, Eli Roth absolutely nails it with this. I mean, he nails the setting and gives you a very good combination of almost like this Hills Have Eyes, but with a little bit of that Friday the 13th. We're running around the forest. We got the cabin, kind of element there. It's a very sweet and original film. I honestly, I love it for that. And again, I think like Eli Roth, just whenever he's playing in a like a concept like this, that's when he's at his best. I mean, he was at his best with things like Thanksgiving. This, I like Hostel for the most part, but like, I would take more Cabin Fevers and more Thanksgivings over those any day of the week.
Yeah, I think this one is just like pure gross out horror. There are just so many scenes in here that hit like a different level of terror for you, just because it is very gross. And I think that's probably why I come back to this one every so often, just because I start thinking those scenes and I'm like, I got to give Cabin Fever a watch. And it's just one of those elements of lost cause horror where, hey, no matter what you do, you're probably not getting out of this, and you just can't catch a break. So this one for me is always something I do revisit.
Yes. And, don't forget the iconic sequence where the little boy stands up and starts screaming pancakes. I'll always love that. All right. So moving on to my next pick here. This one, I mean, you can't have a summer horror film list without including this one. And it's not Friday the 13th. No. I put the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1974 on this bad boy. I mean, I know this is an all-time great. Like we said, we're trying to do a little bit of a mix here. And again, you could have put Friday the 13th on here. I just felt like you guys know me too well. That's too easy. I gotta go with the next film. And the reason I chose this one is because you're talking about August heat, Texas. This film will never not feel like you're in just a hot box whenever you're watching these teens in this car, like when they're in this van driving down the road. Like they are all sweaty, everybody's sweating everywhere. It looks grimy, it looks gross, because it was that's what they were going through on set with this. And yeah, I'll always throw this on at least at some point before October, just because again it is that perfect encapsulation of like the dead heat of summertime August. It's a rough one.
Yeah, it's exhausting just watching everyone sweat, and I think, you mentioned Friday the 13th. I think that's kind of got a different element to it because they were never
Hmm.
able to capture that element of the heat, I think. Whereas Friday the 13th, you look and it's like, oh, Camp Crystal Lake looks like a nice place, to summer at other than someone killing you. But, you know, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you feel exhausted, you feel hot, even if you're watching this in the winter, because they just evoke that through the actual screen itself, and you feel that like at the dinner scene and everything, where it's just like everyone just seems so exhausted. It's one of those films. Well, it's a classic. I'll watch it, but I always feel tired after watching it, just because I'm watching everyone just like sweat all their energy out, and plus you add that element of the gore factor that they have, and it's just this is something that hits different. I think I love Friday the 13th. I love Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, but they don't. There's this pure terror in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre that Toby Hooper was able to capture. That I think, for me, it just feels like a marathon. And I'm not saying that it's a marathon to watch the movie. It's just he pelts you with different levels of terror throughout the entire film. And when you're dealing with the slaughterhouse, and somehow you can almost smell the
I
slaughterhouse
was
while
just
you're
about to say, my
it's
God, one of the few films you can actually smell while watching. Like, oh, it is so gross. I can't agree with you more on that. That's another one. But you also added yourself a classic on this list. So why don't you hit them with your next one?
Oh, so I picked The Hills Have Eyes, but this is not the classic. This is
Oh, I
the
was I
remake.
was unsure. Okay,
Yes.
okay, I got you.
Sorry, I forgot to put the date there. This is actually the remake. I did have a chance to revisit this one, and I think this one as a more contemporary film will hit with a lot of people just because um, it's terrifying for me. Like I revisited this one. I hadn't seen it in years, but I was like, I think this would be a good pick for the list. And I say, my wife had never seen one or two, and
Wow.
that first film, we watched it at night, and there was just an absolute different level of terror, and especially for me when I watched this when I was younger, and then when you look at it and a father now with a daughter, and you throw in that element of the wife and the daughter and what goes on in this film, it absolutely terrified me to the core. So I was like, this one's definitely gonna hit. It's got some great and very melancholy kills in it. I think that, when you look at a Friday 13th or Halloween, you're like, that's a very creative kill. But like these ones are just disgusting. You really feel them emotionally. And, I think that's why this film is something that I will continuously revisit. But I have to be mentally prepared for it, to be honest.
No, and you're completely correct. This is one of the few times where I would say that a remake it bests the original. I love the original. Like I have it. I have the Arrow version, I believe, on Blu-ray. But this is one of those movies. I think Alexander Aja just absolutely knocked this out of the park. Obviously, he is one of the great modern horror directors. He went on to do things like Piranha and Crawl and other films. Like High Tension is one that he did before this. So it's like he's an established name, but like I absolutely adore this movie. I mean, yes, it does have some rough subject matter. I've been very open on the channel that I am not the biggest fan. I think Luke and I are both not very big fans of SA, so there's a little bit of that in this. But I think like this is one of those movies that is just so fascinating to me how much deeper they go with the lore and all the things that they just kind of touched on in the original. Like going when the dad has to go find his baby, and he goes into that town, and you see the kids with their deformities, and you got the old lady in the seat, and the guy. It's all twisted shit, man.
Yeah, they cover so much ground in this and really hit every level of horror for you, where it's emotional, it's gross out, it's just absolutely terrifying from what we do see. I think this film fires on all cylinders from a horror perspective. So, I think this one, if you haven't checked it out, sorry we spoiled some of it, but this is one I think you really have to sit down and watch. It is sometimes it can be rough to get through if you're not prepared for everything that's in here, because they really do cover a lot of different kinds of horror.
Absolutely. But yeah, definitely. I'm actually stoked that you picked that one because like I was prepared to talk about the original, but yeah, I do love the remake a lot. Going into my next pick here, this is another really recent one. This is only within the last few years, but I mean, this is a movie that it just radiates summer. I saw it with you. It was the weekend of July 4th. I believe it was actually the
It
4th
was
of
on
July.
July
We went.
4th at our
Mhm.
art house, either in the nightlight.
Yeah, we went that morning and we saw it, and I just remember being completely transported, and that is Midsummer. Now, I know some of you going off this list, there's some people who are probably really loving what we're picking right now. This is totally going to throw some people off because, like, this is not for everybody, but man, I love how bright this film is. I love how warm and cozy it feels. Like, it really is just like all these flowers and sunshine. And then all these horrific things are happening, and all these like messed up uncomfortable situations all around. I mean, it's in my opinion, it's Aster at his best. I know everybody loves Hereditary, but this is my favorite of his films.
Yeah, I know you mentioned how vibrant it is. For some reason, when I picture Hereditary versus Midsummer, it's always Cocoa Pebbles versus Fruity Pebbles, and I don't know
That's a
why.
great.
Just because
That is a perfect analogy.
because it
Like,
is so it is so vibrant, and I think that's why I gravitated to it. I always love the kind of cult element to things and what they're celebrating here and how they go about it. I think there's some DNA in there that you do see from pr- you know Wicker Man, things like that, that
mhm.
are iconic cult like films. But Ari Aster really does take a different avenue. I think he explores some things that we don't necessarily see in every cult film, and really does make it its own. And I don't know how long the theatrical version is. I've watched the director's cut, so,
I
and I
was
know the director's cut.
it's 2:15. Is
Okay,
the
so
is It's a little over 2 hours.
and I know it's a little bit longer, a film to get through, but it does not feel that way. This one, I like you, when we were in the theater, I was absolutely sold. For me, I know some people don't like the opening, but I thought the opening was absolutely compelling and really just has that somber tone, really adds that somber tone to it, really gets you in the headspace of Florence Pugh's character, So, and just from a psychological perspective of realism, I think her character is just so authentic and the performance is so great. And of course, the ending's so satisfying, right?
Oh
But
yeah.
it's like, there's some touchy elements in here as well. But I think they're handled just so well. And again, bringing that terror to the screen. This is, for me, this is a must see in any film. Summer certainly, but this has to be on any horror film list, I think.
Absolutely. It's one of my all-time favorites, and I think like not to go too deep into it because we have some other films to talk about, but Florence Pugh and Jack Rainier, like their chemistry and just how believable they are as a couple that's falling apart is so great. These two literally like they sold that so well. And like Florence Pugh is somebody that like from the moment that she like broke out on the scene, I was like, wow, she's a really strong actress. I'll admit, Jack Rainier, like there were some roles he took in some Transformers movies and stuff where I just wasn't buying him. But this is really where it was like, oh, he's got some teeth. Okay, I see. He's just got to get the right script and the right director. And yeah, dude, like they sold it to me. Like that was one of the more fascinating elements is just how you were so back and forth with them at times, and then it does eventually switch to one side, but it takes a little bit. And yeah, man, I love this movie. I could talk about it for ages. And yes, I agree with you. That opening, it's one of my favorite. When she cries through that phone, haunting,
Oh
haunting
my
sound.
gosh, what a way to set a tone for a film, because at that point, you jump into her life, but anything's on the table. For me, it's such a demented kind of opening that you're wondering, what does the next 2 hours of this film look like? What kind of ground are we going to cover? And Ari Aster does not disappoint.
Oh no, he does not. Alrighty, so now we're going to be jumping into Luke's next pick here, a little flick from 2007. You want to take us off there, sir?
Yes, yes. Well, I did mention, Ari Aster did not disappoint, but I uncovered this one recently because of the disappointments from old Rennie Harlan there at the theater, The Strangers. So that one did not resonate with me. Prompted me to go back and check out Vacancy. Um, and I gotta say, this one shares some similar DNA to The Strangers, but brings some different elements to it. Um, and this one, I forgot how good this film is. I think it's a little overlooked in the horror community. I don't see too many people talking about it, so I hope that does change. But it's got the great Luke Wilson in it, so how could I not bring this one up? But just I think that we have the Airbnbs now, but stopping at a motel and being stuck on the side of the road, I think that's always such a terrifying element. And then when you put in that VHS and watching the couple just watch the television and then start realizing that's the room that they're in, and for me, absolutely terrifying scene, because then all they aware is heightened and they don't know what's going to happen. Plus we have Ethan Embry in this, and I
Mhm.
forgot that he was in this, and I absolutely love him in Vegas Vacation. I know it's probably not a a big take for a lot of people, but this one, I think there's a lot of interesting elements. I think they pull it off certainly better than the newest installment of The Strangers, but I think they bring that tension, they bring the horror. So this one is one that I hope a lot of people, if you haven't seen it, go out and check out Vacancy, certainly this summer.
Hey, well, not to completely derail us here, because this is one that I do need to revisit. It was one I wanted to before we sat down to do this, but honestly, we had so many screeners last week. I couldn't find the time. But this is something that would be great for us to revisit before we talk about maybe Strangers Chapter 2 or Chapter 3, because I also want to revisit one called Your Next that I know we're big fans of, that I also think fits within that kind of home invasion kind of unsettling nature there. So we'll definitely be talking a little bit more Vacancy. So if you guys are Vacancy fans, let us know down in the comments, and yeah, we'll definitely make that happen. All right, so kind of getting into my final pick and then Luke's final pick here. My final, I mean, again, I had to throw some classics on here. I was really strong with the hidden gems and kind of the ones that are a little bit more off the beaten path for, I'd say, most of this list. But I had to have Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and one that I just felt like it wouldn't be right to not include is The Lost Boys. I mean, you talk about going out on, it's vampires, it's summertime, it's literally going out there and they
They're at
go
a
to the, what is
carnival.
it, the pier, the carnival, the
Yeah,
pier, what do they call it, the boardwalk, the
boardwalk.
boardwalk. Yeah, the boardwalk. I mean, it is just pure summer bliss, and I mean, this is just one of those films that is absolutely timeless. I Lost Boys was something that, like, my mom was a huge fan of it, so she showed it to me when I was really young. And I mean, it's one of those things where it's also got a wonderful cast and just such a creative and unique idea. And yeah, I mean, anytime I sit down and watch this movie, I always feel those summer vibes. And I mean, you got the cast of Corey Feldman, Corey Haim is in this, of course, Keith Sutherland, and Jason Patrick. I mean, it's seriously like, this is an all timer for a reason.
Absolutely. This is on my list for one of the best horror films I think ever. This one, we talked of our Killer Clowns, and I said that I uncovered that one at my aunt's house. Now this one was her personal favorite, so this one was on the television a lot. So I remember this one growing up was definitely part of my childhood. I just thought it was such a fun concept. This was probably my first introduction to like vampires on screen,
That's a
I
good
would
one.
say, because it was just something that was always on television. And of course, you can't go wrong with that cast. The Frog Brothers, come on, it's just great character work, I think. You really feel like you're part of that friend group. And when anyone talks about the 80s, I think you can point to the Lost Boys and say, this is the 80s firing on all cylinders. This is what you think of. If you're looking at a picture, it's going to be a picture from the Lost Boys, because, it's so true to the actual mid 80s. We're almost hyper 80s at that point, where the music, the style, everything. And it's just got so much nice scenery. When they're at the boardwalk, those scenes always just pop with the lights and the rides and everything. It's just an absolutely inspiring film. When you talk about iconic vampire films, Lost Boys is at the top of the list.
it takes that concept and it just like heightens it by so much, and I absolutely adore it for that. Like the scenes that I love from this that'll always stick out in my mind are, of course, the ending, like Home Alone style, like where they're setting up traps and stuff like that for the vampires is always great. When they get the one vampire into the bathtub of holy water, it's just, when they
When
collect the holy water, it's
Yes,
like
that's what I was about to bring up. That is one of my all-time favorite scenes is when I think they're doing a baptism and then the
yeah.
Frog Brothers come in to fill up their guns, and it's just like absolutely such a oddball scene, but it just is so much fun. And again, they have great comedy bits in here throughout, but also, staying true to the horror roots. So, this is something that I probably everyone has seen. I hope you've seen it because this is an absolute treat of a film.
100%. This is definitely one that I would say you should put at the top of your list if you've never seen it, for a great summer horror film. Alrighty, Luke, you have the honor of taking our last slot in this top 10, whatever you want to call this, pick 10 list of summer horror films. And yeah, I just knew that when we were putting this thing together and I was constructing where these were going to go, this was going to have to be the final one we talk about, because this one is still, I think more people are finding it, but I still think more people need to discover it. So take it away, sir.
Absolutely. My final pick here gonna be Summer of '84. This one you cannot go wrong. Yeah, this one I think there are more people seeing it, but it is still kind of flying under the radar a little bit. This is my most contemporary pick out of everything, and this was one, to be honest, was not on my radar. I listened to Adam Green's podcast, and this one popped up as it was coming out. So I remember I immediately purchased the Blu-ray and had to go pick it up. It was like at a random Walmart. I had to drive, I think, like 20-25 minutes away just to go get it because not every Walmart was carrying it apparently. And I went home that day and I watched this. This was actually, I believe, in the summer as well. I watched it on a summer morning, and I tell you, this one I was just completely enthralled with. When we talk about, that Monster Squad vibe, that kind of DNA of being told through the lens of a child that brings different horror elements to it, Summer of '84 fits the bill perfectly. From the very opening scenes, you're already kind of trying to pick out who is our suspect here, and by the end of it, boy, they go into some territory I was not being
Oh my
prepared for.
god. Dude, the ending to this movie will literally punch you in the gut. Like it is intense. I mean, I don't even want to say any more of that. All I can say is that this is like we're referencing Monster Squad. You also got a reference for people my age, in their like, late 20s. Disturbia with Shia LaBeouf.
Yeah.
Like that's huge, very, very related to that. You got the neighborhood, you got a lot of things going on, a little bit of a slightly similar subject matter, but like, man, it does so much with its concept, and there's so much great tension built in this film. There's so much great character work amongst our group here, where it's, what is it, it's Davey, Tommy, Curtis, and is it Woody, I
Yes,
believe, are the
yes, yes,
kids.
yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Woody, yep.
Yeah, so it's like they're all wonderful, and then they have Nikki gets involved with that. And yeah, I think like Richard, I'm gonna look it up here. Rich Sommer is he plays a character in this. I don't want to say any more than that. But when you go back and watch it, reference his name, you'll get it. My God, like, just goes from 0 to 100 in so many sequences, and by the end you are just absolutely terrified.
Yeah, this one, especially with the lighthearted tone throughout the film and the camaraderie of the boys, when they start getting into some deeper subject matter toward the end of the film, it's something where it's like, whoa, this film took a little bit of a turn, but it absolutely works. It leaves a lasting impression, and this is a much smaller film compared to some of the ones that we've covered, and to really create an authentic feeling '80s film like this, I think working within the budget, I gave them major props to, because I can watch this and believably think this is an '80s film, from the costume design to the actual dialogue and to just the characters being played and the subjects that we're covering. So big props to covering a very authentic kind of '80s type of film and doing it in the modern times. Just something that I think people can have a lot of fun with when you're dealing with the comedy bits with the boys. You feel like you're part of the group, and I think that's that adds to the terror because it is so lighthearted in certain elements, but then so dark in others. So this film, you definitely have to check out. I know we said flies a little bit under the radar, so if you haven't seen this one, make sure you check out Summer of '84.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure this is a Shudder exclusive. I think you can still pick this up on Shudder. I believe they were the ones who distributed this. So yeah, I gotta say that's a heck of a film, and I really hope that you guys go out and check it out. Again, let us know down below, guys. Were any of these some of your favorite summer horror films? Are there any more that we could have added to this list? I know there were probably, at least in myself, there were 5 more I could have put on this list that I kind of battled with. We had things like The Burning, going back and forth. Of course, any of the Friday the 13th. There's a ton of stuff. Jaws. I mean, I just didn't want to go again too easy. We wanted to keep things a little bit more fun, a little bit more kind of spread across the board. So yeah, this was a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoy this video, and yeah, we'll definitely consider doing more of these again. I would say I think we have a good time with this. So yeah, other than that, we got a lot of great stuff up on the channel. So if you guys like any of our content and think we're doing a good job, please hit that subscribe button. And yeah, other than that, I guess that's about it. So enjoy your summer. We have a lot more content to come. And yeah, until then, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the hard shit, gonna do it live. Cause SplatterCast kick it every day they live. SplatterCast, gonna smash your ass. 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 SplatterCast, gonna smash your ass.